Hello and welcome, everybody. Hi, my name is Raven. I'm the program's associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Jessica Mitrani and Suzanne Herrera Li Puma. We're thrilled to welcome poet Anthony Madrid here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, we are on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wapinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We encourage you to check the chat for a living document of resources and actions. The Brooklyn Rail would like to thank the Terra Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support for our growing archive. You can view today's event and our full archive on the Rail's YouTube channel. And now, to introduce today's guest and host, New York-based artist Jessica Mitrani makes multivalent works which are fundamentally concerned with exploring social, linguistic, and aesthetic constructs of the feminine. Her work has been exhibited, performed, and screened and broadcast internationally, including at OCD Chinatown, Tanya Bonakdar Gallery, White Columns, Brooklyn Academy of Music, Center Pompidou, Bogotá Museum of Modern Art, among several other venues. Suzanne Herrera Li Puma works at the intersections of Latinx and Latin American arts, intersectional feminisms, and critical theory. Herrera Li Puma was a 2021 ACLS Leading Edge Fellow at the nonprofit Breakthrough, New York, and she holds a PhD in rhetoric from the University of California, Berkeley. And now passing it off to you, Suzanne and Jessica.
Thank you so much, Raven. Jessica, I'm trying to find you in the squares. Well, I'm really honored to be here, and thank you for the introductions and for the invitation. Jessica, do you want to say hi as well?
Hi, how are you? And thank you so much for the introduction and invitation.
I thought I would just read a little bit more about Jessica's art and practice that I've been learning with her. As Raven mentioned, Jessica is a multidisciplinary, multifaceted artist and performer, and I'm excited to primarily talk to you today about your work that's going on at the exhibition at La MAMBO Gallery, Great Jones Street. I dreamt the landscape was looking at me, a version of which was also exhibited at the Museo de Arte Moderno in Bogotá. So you've been working in multidisciplinary film, performance, and art spaces for some time now. Some of the videos you've written and directed include Rita Goes to the Supermarket. And if Raven, if you have some of the slides, we could put some of those up. I won't mention, not everything I mentioned is on the slides, but we could just go through them. Rita Goes to the Supermarket, Artículos Femeninos, and La Divané, among others. You've also worked extensively in theater, and your collaboration with the civilians group, The Undertaking, was performed at Brooklyn's New Wave Theater. Oh, this new screen covered my. And we're looking at Rita Goes to the Supermarket, which is one of those early works. And Raven, you can just scroll through them as I speak, up until like the 9th or 10th slide. So another work that I'm really excited to talk about that kind of led into the present work today, which we'll start with, is A Crucigamista, which was which you created in collaboration with Paula Parisot, and you directed and did art direction for, which was featured in Arte One in Brazil, the first TV channel exclusively devoted to art and culture. And you recently been invited to develop a multimedia project as the guest artist for the 2022 Princeton Atelier. So congratulations on that. And I'm just so pleased to be here with you, Jessica. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so I thought maybe one of your most recent projects that I wanted to highlight before we talk about the work at La MAMBO is Acruciramista. So I think it's just one or two after the traveling lady. Can you just share a little bit about that project, how it came about? It was commissioned and aired on television, which is really exciting, and was series of like short, playful, educational videos about Latin American history and feminism. So yeah, I just would love to hear you share about that a little bit to start.
Yeah, that was a very interesting project because for an artist to be commissioned to do what they call cultural peels, which are basically short videos related to Latin American culture, which was a large subject to address. So the only parameter was that it had to deal with Latin American artists. So for me, it was a great opportunity to dive into what would be like exploring what is a Latin American identity. Does a Latin American identity exists? And we created 2 series. Each series has 7 videos. The first one, as you see in the slide, was called America Invertida, and it dealt with each episode was for a theme like identity, memory, borders, words that are also linked to Latin America, like underdevelopment or development or progress. So it was a very playful way to dive into Latin America. And for me to be commissioned television in this day and age, I said, what would be a good way to present artists and thinkers that I wasn't, exposed to. And I'd like to introduce as many artists as possible in a short period of time. So they're very rapid, and it's all about references. There's nothing like, there's no in-depth, but it's more like an open source for people who are interested in an image or an association or an artist to go and Google. So for me, it was this open source of references that were important for me. And the second series was called America Feminizada. So the first series was written and done 2017, and the second one was 2018. And it was very interesting that just after 1 year, I already was thinking about something else. I was more aware of the statistics of the region in sense of the violence against women, feminicide, the extractivism practices that, for example, in places where the extractivist practices are more prevalent, the domestic violence is higher. So these sort of things made me think about how to approach this new series to use the adjective feminized to be valued instead of an adjective that is normally used to for something that is in a pejorative way, And for me, those episodes were divided into themes that are, for example, we see now Berta Cáceres, who's an activist. She was carrying right. So that was part of an episode called Mother. So we had archetypes or themes in each episode. And the episode of the mother included Berta because at some point we say, Mother Earth also needs a mother. And so that's an example of that episode. And then we have Lorena Cabnal, which is in the next slide. You can see a little video of her and her thoughts about what propelled her to start indigenous feminisms that deals with communities, so basically communal feminisms. And those feminisms from Latin America were very important for me because I was, at the beginning of my practice, feminism for me was a vocabulary. So Rita Goes to the Supermarket was very influenced by, American feminism. And years later, and through this project, I was very informed by indigenous feminisms, Black feminisms, feminisms from Latin America, the contemporary movements in Latin America that have propelled so many incredible laws So that was America Feminizada and America Invertida that really informed a lot of my interest in ecofeminism and my current, work. So I don't know if you want to play the video.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, that was a wonderful overview, and there's a video. Our slides toggle between still images and video, so we appreciate your patience as we move to the video. And we have this is in Spanish with Portuguese subtitles, and we will be able to put in the chat a approximated English translation. Oh, I don't know if the sound's on.
We'll have sound in just a second.
Territorio ancestral contra todos los efectos del patriarcado capitalista neoliberal, toda la industria extractiva que se somete hoy en territorios indígenas, y por lo tanto de articular en esta propuesta la recuperación y defensa del territorio cuerpo y del territorio tierra en una propuesta emancipatoria que teje con la pluralidad de vida de otros pueblos y de otros feminismos emancipatorios.
Thank you so much. So yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, we have the English translation. So I can read that I think that for me it was an accumulation of it's indignaciones, right, Jessica?
Yeah.
So that's a hard word to translate, but sort of like indignation against injustices that led to a communitarian feminist proposal, which is about defending the first territory, that is our body. It's also about defending the ancestral territory against all the effects of patriarchal neoliberal capitalism and against all of the extractive industries inflicted upon indigenous territories today. Therefore, it was also important to articulate in this proposal the recovery, recuperation, and defense of the body territory, territorio cuerpo, and the land territory, territorio tierra, in an emancipatory proposal that weaves together the plurality of lives of many communities and of other emancipatory feminisms. Thank you for sharing that, Jessica. And could you just talk a little bit about how that episode was? There were different themes. This was a theme of the weaver, right? So how those episodes on the sort of like the feminist feminism in the Americas, America Feminista, how those were organized, and specifically this one about the weaver.
Yeah, the episode about weavers was all about what that we're all literally a social fabric. So we played with inviting different artists. For example, Cecilia Vicuña was one of the artists. Monica Bravo was one of the artists with her work on textiles, and also different collectives. So for us, the thread of that episode was all about making sure that textiles also is considered like, like sculpture, like painting, or like any other art, and it's not, as it's been before, like devalued as a lesser art because it's normally produced and made by women. So we highlighted contemporary artists, also Carolina Caicedo, different artists that were working in that with that milieu, and also collectives. The importance of feminists that we are, together. Each one of us is because we all are. So it was weaving in every sense, not only of the material of each different artist, but also of the concept of community and solidarity between groups and individuals. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Also, I noticed that in Lorena's language, it's the weaving is a verb. It's in English, you have to have the kind of like weaving together, but the weaving is its own verb, and it can take so many different forms, and and there's an emphasis in the sort of the necessity of in creating an emancipatory proposal of conceptualizing plurality, and that weaving is a way to sort of physically and imaginatively think of plurality and think of joining together while preserving certain kinds of difference.
Correct. Everything that had to do with fabric, social fabric and real fabric.
Well, Jessica, I know this. It's a bit of a jump, but I also want to get to some of your work which is currently being viewed in the MAMM Gallery, and it was a work that started in Colombia, right? So could you tell us a little bit about the beginning of this work and how it started, and also, just share with us a little bit about it.
Yeah, and maybe do you want to? Maybe we can put the slide that is the previous from that one. And so this is a screen, an installation view of the work at the Museum of Modern Art in Bogotá. And what you see here, it's a little textile a piece of it, which was a portal co-created by Judith Solis, this artisan from Colombia, because we wanted to recognize that the Museum of Modern Art in Bogotá was built on Muisca territory. So this was a tactile way to do territory acknowledgement, and that's how the exhibition started with this textile, and then you had to enter. So it served both as a recognition, but also like as a portal to this other world. And the exhibition consisted on 3 videos, and we did a triangular structure. I said we because the videos were made in collaboration with Alex Czerwitzinski, who has been a collaborator before, and he does animation, video mapping, which is very important, not only in this work, but in other works that I've done. And we collaborate together all on the graphics and on all the post-production aspects of the video. And for me and for Alex, it was important that we didn't have like this bidimensional experience, because we're talking about territory, we're talking about nature, we're talking about landscape. So we wanted to have something a little bit more tactile and a little bit more three-dimensional. So I brought the soil from my parents' house in Chia, and that gave it, not only like a ground for the video, but I guess a ground for me. That was important. And the videos were presented, as I said, in a triangle. So you had benches, and each person had, it was very intimate. You could walk around it, and that was the point. But also you could sit and focus on each video. And there was, I feel there was also more emphasis on the text aspect than it is at La Mama, just because of the configuration, but I can talk about that later. So here you see that for La Mama, because of the space, we decided not to do the triangle, but to do this sort of U. The scale is much bigger, so it feels like you're immersed in the work. Very different experiences.
Yeah, and could we go one slide forward, because I think that'll show it. There's some prints when you enter, but this is more of a feeling, and you can see the dirt on the bottom of the installation, and the 3 screens, which in the previous configuration there had been a triangle, so the screens were all facing outward, right? And a person would have to walk around, and then this is it was sort of like inversion of that, where you're sort of encapsulated by the 3 screens.
Yes, exactly. And in Colombia we had some of the text on the soil, but a lot of the texts were on the screen. And here I realized that I wanted to give the viewer a little bit more space, and I wanted people to, have a space contemplation. And if they wanted to read, then they could, read the text on the soil. But it was not necessarily the experience that I wanted. I wanted people to have the choice between, if they wanted to read, that's fine. But if not, just to be immersed in the work.
Thank you. And so the proposal you had shared with me was, and it comes through in the title a little bit, I dreamt the landscape was looking at me, that you were going to think about these three terms: nature, territory, and landscape, right? So these are three terms that are both, very significant in thinking toward like a libertarian, eco-feminist politics, but also these are terms that are very connected with some of like histories of colonial capture, violence, erasure, even the categorization of them as separate, which was something that you mentioned when we were preparing for this talk.
Yeah, that's right. The invitation from the museum was to reflect upon these three subjects. And for me, I was already, I was reading before the pandemic books like the Life of Plants, or How to Foresting, or Mushrooms at the End of the World. And for me, it was more that we are environment, we are nature, we're not separated from nature. So I had already those books in the back of my mind, and I was thinking about how not to privilege like anthropocentric thought, but also acknowledging that, well, this human brain is all that I have. So I was thinking, what would vegetable thought be visually? What would mineral thought be visually? So those were the ideas that were in the back of my head. And since I was in a very strict lockdown in Colombia during the pandemic, and I had all this time, at my parents' house that has like land, like horses and water and animals. So it really enabled me to experience all these ideas, that it's one thing like to read about it, and it's one thing to wake up and just go to the field and interact with nature every day. Being a New Yorker, it was a completely different experience. And all of us being in a pandemic where time stopped, and you had a very different sense of being. So it was an incredible experience. And I didn't know that some of the things that I was filming and doing were going to end up in the work. So the work is informed by all these academic sort of like books, but also by these experiential, playful, moments that I had in every day. So it's a mixture of that. And then when the invitation really came about, so I had some of the footage, and then I started working more intentionally on what text I will include for the work.
Yes, and and there was a sort of a collage about how you assemble them together. Each of those terms have so much, but I think the way that you dealt with them, I think when we were talking, you said that you're a storyteller who works with fragments, or that works with the fragmentation that's already there, and you kind of put it together. And so, I think that was one of my experiences of watching these. And would you like to? Should we go to one of the? So there's
Sure.
three screens, and they each have slightly different sort of narratives, so to speak. But would you like to
Sure.
start? We can start maybe with the video of the palm tree, Raven, if you have that available. So would you be, Jessica, would you want to show just one more to get a bit more of the sense?
Sure.
Could we also go to the video with the horse? So this is one screen, there's a palm tree, and then on another screen, there's other narratives happening. Thank you, Raven. So can you just tell us a little bit about the horse, and then maybe we can go to the palm tree. I just wanted to share that there's, I think, Raven, we just have one more slide with text from the palm tree, or we can just put it in the chat. Thank you so much. I think, yeah, earlier. Maybe. There we go. Yeah, the text was, if I assume I'll never be able to understand the thoughts of palm trees, I would doubt the possibility of ever knowing another being. And so maybe that could be our opening to discussing these two clips together.
Sure. So yeah, so the palm tree was part of the nature video, and so the nature video has three parts. One is it's a walk with the walking palm trees, which is what a little clip of what you saw. Another one is called The Metaphysics of the Iguana, and the other one is the Romanian rocks that breathe, grow, and reproduce. So these the segment of nature, it opens with some sort of like with a curtain, because for me it's almost like the awe of nature, the awe of the strangeness of nature, and the awe of nature. And actually there are palm trees in Costa Rica that they say that they walk because they just look, they go towards the sun. So it's not that they walk, but with our human brain, we always want to, I think, humanize things. So I just push it a little bit in a cartoony way to actually have a walk with the palm trees. And the same with the Romanian rocks. They're rocks from they're called trovans, and it's imperceptible to the human eye that they actually, have this movement that looks like breathing. So again, it's exaggerating a little bit more what is already for me like magical, and interacting with the iguana. I had this moment where this iguana came, and I tried to touch her, and I had like 6 minutes of me and the iguana, kind of like I'm like caressing the iguana. My editor is like, Jessica, we're not going to do 6 minutes with you and the iguana. I said, okay, fine, but it was a real moment of connection. So for me, I mean, it's both like a sense of humor, but also it is quite meaningful to have these encounters that and to be in the world and try to be in the world as with having subject to subject, and not me you know, having an interaction that is unilateral. So I think that was a theme that was throughout nature, this attempt to understand the other, this whether you achieve it or not, it's okay. But I think the effort for me is important, the effort to listen to organs, spirits, you know, plants. So that was nature. And then territorio, which, you know, deals obviously with, I mean, how can we not talk about conquista in, you know, if we are talking about territorio. So again, I divided into 3 chapters. Acto uno was Conquista, which is a little story of the other Cortes. And then the second was Oberhausen, or, you know, apologies to the horses, where I apologize I literally apologize to the horses for, you know, what we've done with them and to them. And the last one is Movement, which for me is like the 3rd act or the chapter that would promote, you know, walking in the streets, being, putting our bodies present in Latin American feminisms. The body is very important to embody, you know, and to embody embody in pleasure. The pleasure of the body are something radical. The pleasure of being together are something radical. Like that, yes, there is a lot of like injustices, and that's why we put our bodies there. But the acts of self-care, acts of solidarity with women in a world that is misogynist are already radical efforts and moves. So for me, territorio is that it has that little history. I use text a lot in my work, and because I love books, so for me, and coming from the theater, I like this idea, so the idea of like acts or a chapter. So in all of my work, there's fragmentation, and there's also a lot of episodes, I would say. And then the 3rd video, what's called, it's the name of the piece, I Dreamt the Landscape Was Looking at Me, which was actually a dream when I was at my parents' house, you know, in a big font. That's what I dreamt that. I dreamt that sentence. And it was me, you know, pulling pieces of my hair out when I was, you know, when I was there every day. I collected a lot of things in my hair, like leaves and stuff. So, and I, you know, I love the work of like Alejandro Jodorowsky. He has these acts called psychomagias. So I was playing around with different rituals, with dances. Had the opportunity to do that every day. So what I did for landscape was that just get rid of my hair, put it on the ground, and then I pretended that my hair mixed with a crystal, you know, gave birth to this huge phallic flower that would teach us the how-tos of consuming, tips for consuming in the future.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for those explanations and descriptions of the process. So yeah, I just wanted to, I think we could go to that clip next, but before, I just wanted to sort of, yeah, I just appreciated the different ways that I mean, I think the palm tree is maybe, you know, I think a lot of your work has a playfulness to it, but there is also like a very deep sense of like care or tenderness to the way I think the images, but also the language that you offer to the viewer solicits a sense of listening, and solicits avenues for cultivating forms of perception, which you know, currently in, you know, dominant perception are sort of closed or blocked by what's called coloniality, what's called, you know, these different habits of embodied ways of being that that close down or that block or that don't have those openings have been sort of disavowed, or they've been neglected or atrophied, you know, and so I think those, and sometimes those can seem quite simple, right? Like the act of listening at times doesn't seem so complicated, but failing to be curious and failing to extend care are actually two deeply political, I think, acts that require, just or that entail consistent revisions of embodied ways of being and relational ways of being. So another frame that I think comes out in your work that I hear in these different pieces is these frameworks that, certainly decolonial and ecological feminisms think offer us frameworks of interdependence, a framework of the social that is grounded in a sense of interdependence and interrelation as a starting point, as like the starting point for imagining futurity. So thank you. So I think we can, so this piece that you were saying with your hair, this is one of the final pieces. I just also wanted to note it because I think it's not super easy to see in these videos, but the way the text appears on the soil is quite beautiful. It's very delicately projected against the soil, so it's put in relief against the ground, and so we're pasting it into the chat, but in the installation, it's sort of offered very lightly to the viewer. And yes, because is it okay if I put a little bit of the it's not a one-to-one English translation, but just a few of the lines into the chat?
Sure.
I think they were.
Yeah, and
okay.
It was interesting because for the exhibition at La MAMA, I edited a lot of the text, and I guess, and actually this text didn't make it to the exhibition at La MAMA. We're doing all of the Museum of Modern Art is doing a publication, or did a publication, an artist book with the texts and some images. And when I was translating the text in English and looking at La Mama's, space, I wanted to separate also the ideas, and so I selected fewer texts, but they're in this publication, so.
Yes, no, and I just selected a bit from some of the crystal texts that you shared with me that they're not exactly the same, but they give a little bit of the sentido there.
Right.
So there's one that wasn't in this or that didn't appear in the section of the video, but the section opens with a line that says, "Thought is the crystallization of forms." And I was so interested in looking at your work and the different themes you're exploring in these pieces, and your both like going to the crystal as like this metaphor, but also challenging the ways that thought can become sort of stuck or rigidified, and that crystallization process can actually be quite damaging, or be quite can be a point of closure. So
Thank you.
Yeah, and can you also, do you want to talk a little bit about what, I mean, I know you shared that you were you're working with your hair in the water, and yeah, I didn't know if there was more you wanted to share about that. I have lots more questions.
You have what?
I have lots more questions, but I wanted to let you talk about that too.
I don't know, as I said, it was very like a psychomagic ritual. It was, it was a moment of playing around with ideas, materializing ideas. One thing, as I said, to read certain things, but then to do a performance where there's the water, there's the hair, there's the earth. It was some sort of like alchemical transformation that I wanted to invoke, a transformation to continue to change, to prompt fragmentation in a way that, when you separate different aspects of yourself, you can look at them differently, and then hopefully reintegrate them in a more, in a whole, not necessarily sometimes to create balance, but I would say to live with those fragments, to live with those contradictions. I think I work in collage because I myself felt always these sort of like fragmented identities, these different identities that one's inhabit, and that sometimes the world wants you to hierarchize these identities, are you more Colombian or Jewish, for example, and there's things that you don't have to choose, and you don't have to be more on this or more than that, but it's very interesting, these sort of moments where you have to think that you have to choose. And I think it's all about, existing with these fragments of yourself.
Thank you, Jessica. I mean, those are two things that I really appreciated about how you particularly approach collage, because it can be used in so many different ways, but there is an openness to the way that you put things together that I didn't feel a sense of, finality. It's not that there wasn't many layers of messages, but it was like a series of different offerings that bear traces of, here's computer animation is very clearly animation, it's playful in a certain way, and it's kind of offering you a certain kind of like computer nature interface, and then your voice, with the horses, and there's but even there's a one that we haven't seen, I don't know if it's going to come up, but of just a kind of cross-section of geologic rocks that move. And I think what I'm hearing as one of your invitations is to not only think of regard the world around us as like one both deserving and soliciting our listening, our attentiveness and care, but also one that might have fluidities that appear as rigidity. So that I think that your hair and the crystal could seem like two very different types of beyond very different timelines of ephemerality. And but then you have like a geologic rock movements, or the palm tree moving, that suggest that could kind of nudge one a little bit into a different place of thinking about fluidity,
Yeah.
even as you're also working with fragmentation.
Yeah.
So the piece ends with these very beautiful animations, and maybe we can show this and then talk a little bit about your work with animation, collaboration, and also, you know, also some of the eyes. We can talk about eyes. You want to just talk a little bit about this final animation? It kind of closes and it appears on all three screens. It's one of the few that traverses the entire room as the piece begins, you know, it closes, and then we'll start a new loop.
Yeah, and that was very nice. The difference between, let's say, the triangular you know, configuration versus the U. So this loop is the one that starts and ends the videos, and I call that some sort of like atmosphere, or like cosmos, or like primordial, like waters, or whatever it is that is like the mystery of the beginning, and that's what prompts each video. And at the end of that, yeah, I wanted to do this animation of this rhizome, because again, it really literally expresses everything that we're talking about like intercommunication, about solidarity, about this horizontality that is the source of survival for the planet and for all of us, you know, this permeability and this understanding that there's no, you know, if we throw the garbage here, the garbage doesn't go anywhere, or it's like when we had the non-smoking section in the airplanes, right? I mean, I don't know if you remember, but I remember, you know, that you could smoke on the airplanes, and there was like the non-smoking section, and you're like, okay. So I think we treat the planet a little bit exactly the same, you know, and no, you know, this is all the same. So it's that idea of these finite and tender and interconnected and interrelated structures that are and atoms and us. So that's at La Mama, it's nice because you can see in the U how everything comes together. So that's what I was versus in the triangle that it's just like stopped and you had to like go around. So oh, I don't know, yes. Did I answer that question? Or
yes, no, and I think especially in this one, the sound really came to the front, and I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the sound here, and then, you know, I know you had a collaborator that you're working with as well.
Yes, Sol Leon was an amazing collaborator. We met in Zoom during the pandemic when I was invited to do the exhibition, and he's from Ecuador, and we were discussing, you know, how to treat when you have like 3 videos simultaneously, you know, how to have something that that is not disruptive between one video and the other, because there were certain things like me singing with the horses, for example, or like, you know, when I'm pulling my hair down, those things that are, you know, they call for sound. So it was tricky to see, okay, but if we're going to do it all simultaneously, how are we going to highlight certain sounds? So what he did was he, you know, we had like it's almost like a master, you know, recording, but then you have directional speakers to underline certain sounds for each video. And at the MAMA, you know, that was also done. You have with each screen, you have 2 other speakers that underline certain movements, and that helps the feeling that even though it's one immersive sound, you do have the pleasure of feeling that each video has its own, you know, identity, a sound identity. So that was incredibly rewarding, and I was so happy to work with Sol, and he gathered very different sounds from like the farm, you know, birds and water, to like marimbas from Colombia, Pacific, which I love. So we, in conversation, we, you know, we gathered text and inspiration, and he composed it for this.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I was hearing, especially in this one, water, and the sounds almost of something making a disruption in water. And you know, the reference to the night sky for me was unavoidable because of also how enclosed one is in this, you know, like these you know, lights against a fabric of darkness that also seem to be kind of constellated and moving. And it actually just took me the song. I know the file was called Rhizome, and you spoke about the rhizome, but I just put it together that the rhizome is the root that's growing at the bottom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just think of potatoes when I think of rhizome. So the rhizome is the root, and you see the root grow. Yeah. I was also really struck by the eyes that appear, that like kind of softly appear and disappear. They're part of some of your other works involve eyes, but also, of course, the title is like Dreaming of a Landscape, looking at you. Somebody put eyes in the chat. And you know, we were speaking, and it's a, you know, in some ways maybe like a very simple thing to say about, you know, that, and like, you know, it's not that simple, but you know, there is like an analysis of Enlightenment thought, which is very intertwined with, you know, colonial perception, that that takes the eye as a form of sort of both projective, so that like the eye projects and also erases, in its you know, that it's kind of disavowed of its receptive capacity. It doesn't, it kind of projects onto. So landscape is kind of a projection of a self rather than a reception into the self. And that also at the same time, there is a you know, a very one-sided quality to that act of looking, right? That there aren't other eyes, or there are, you know, that there's a kind of enclosure of perception. And so I think you know, in many ways, you know, the work is very playful, but that there's this proliferation of eyes, but also the kind of gentleness with which they appear and disappear, which brought to me the tactility of a dream, like that, both in the dream in the sense of kind of evanescent quality, but also a dream of like a hope that there could be you know, the forms of perception that that take the eye different places, that move the eye into other traditions that are, of course, already always activated and happening and present, but that are not, you know, the sort of dominant and named perceptual traditions.
Yeah, it's true. It's not the eye to look and to appropriate and to consume and to even to understand, but it's that other eye. It could be like the eye of consciousness, or the eye of divinity, or the eye of nature, or the eye of a frog, or or so is that, I think it's that distance that permits us to look at ourselves. And I think that the more one is in tune with aspects of yourself, the less you project blindly. And I guess the more we don't know ourselves, the more we project ourselves in everything we see. So I'm interested in that space, creating that space to really see the other, or try to see the other. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I think we're approaching the moment where we open the conversation to questions. Oh, there was one last, maybe this will be my first question, but I know I've had a lot of time. There's a very beautiful artist book that do you have it nearby?
I have nearby the artist book. It's like a little artist book object, and we're gonna be so if you come to La Mama, so it's made by Arte dos Gráficos and published by the Museum of Modern Art in Colombia, and you have all the little the texts divided in that we saw the different videos. So you have the images of the videos and you have the texts there. So come to La Mama, visit me. Yeah, and see the book in person.
Yes, and when is that?
We're gonna have at the closing, so June 30th is the closing reception for the show, and we'll be there, and we'll be doing little book signings.
Hey, do you mind just opening one of them so we can see?
Sure.
The page? I'm a paper person, so
Yeah.
so that some of those are images from the videos, and
Videos,
then
and it has like this,
and then some of the
beautiful, like,
text.
thread. So it's very yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This could be a whole other show. Thank you so much, Jessica. So yes, I would love to open it to questions, and your exhibition opens with this sort of phrase, and there's also a mural, "May we walk softly on you," which is your message to one another and also to our surroundings. And so yeah, I just wanted to maybe open our questions with that, and I think that last piece that we saw had that quality as well to it. So
thank you.
Thank you. Really welcome question. Yes, thank you. Yes,
thank you guys so much. That was amazing. So our first question is from our friend GE. So he should be able to unmute now and ask.
Thank you so very, very much. Your art prompts so much in me personally, and then just to feel so many other possibilities down the line. Could you talk a little bit, perhaps? And I was taken by the piece where you are burying parts of your hair and of yourself and that kind of thing, almost as what it feels like. Could you talk about the role of maybe self-emptying as a kind of kenosis in your performance of transformation?
Self what?
Talk about the sort of role of self-emptying.
Self-emptying.
Emptying, yeah.
Self-emptying,
yeah. Okay, which is often sometimes referred to as a kenosis in Christianity, but I was thinking more of, less than that, but more just this wonderful self-emptying as an example for us to lead us and that kind of thing, and for transformation.
Yes, thank you. And it's interesting because it's funny how things sometimes are intentional and sometimes are so unknown even to ourselves. So it was interesting because, as I mentioned before, the text that I was added after. So I think there's one layer about the text that I added, reading about the crystallization of thought, and all of that. But when I was doing that, I think a part of me, it was a very interesting time to be like middle-aged and live at your parents' house day by day. And there was this feeling of shedding. There was this feeling of shedding. There was a feeling of acceptance, of time passing, and what. But I can tell you this now. But at the moment, it was a very organic thing. You know, it wasn't really so. And it's interesting because I can see the work after and read other things to it. But at the moment, it was just a very, almost as if that act is going to teach me something after. So it is a bit like that. And yes, I think since I was very young, I was very afraid of, I guess, this emptiness because I associated with this abysmal vertigo, and I didn't associate it with possibilities, you know. And I think that's, you know, that's like reading Zen theories and Eastern philosophies and Carl Jung, and all of that has really calmed down, and to see those empty spaces of something productive, of something generative. But I feel all of that, the culture is a little bit against that. It's you're bombarded to feel very strange about those moments, you know? So I do feel that moments of estrangements with oneself are profoundly important, you know? It's just that estrangement sounds so negative, but it's not. I don't know if that answered the question.
Oh no, because it's the beginning of resistance, which we need. So yes, I got it. I thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next question will be from Eleanor. So she's gonna be.
Thank you, Raven. Thank you so much, Suzanne, and thank you, Jessica. It was amazing to hear about your work. And my question is just, Jessica, if you have any like particular artists or works who really inspire you, and if there's anyone who particularly inspired this show.
Many artists. I love references, and I love, that's why, you know, collage is so important, and also the evidence of the references. In one of my prints, for example, I used a body of Max Ernst. He has a novel called In Semaine de Beauté, and surrealism really has inspired me all my life, like Leonora Carrington, Leonore Fini, all the surrealist ladies, and Louise Bourgeois very much, the writings of Louise Bourgeois, and the attempt of Louise Bourgeois to put psychology into marble, to put, and, you know, for me, you know, I consider myself like a storyteller. I like theater, I like narrative, and there's not, those adjectives are not very popular in visual arts, but that's really what I gravitate to. And I think the surrealism, the surrealist ways of being in the world, where there's no really a separation between, you know, dream and wake life, and all these altered states that, you know, challenge what we call reality. So I guess Hans Bellmer also, even though, you know, some people might say, oh, you're a feminist, and how can you like Hans Bellmer, who uses all these dismembered figures and dolls? And I'm like, well, you know, for me, he's talking about the psyche. You know, for me, he's talking about, so I don't take it literally. So that's one example of, let's say, things that I also question myself. Oh, why do I gravitate to certain, you know, iconography that might seem, you know, misogynist or violent or whatever, but in each case, it's different. I cannot make generalizations, you know, but definitely surrealism, you know, has that, you have that tension in surrealism. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Literature a lot, like, yeah, Virginia Woolf,
Okay.
Gertrude Stein, many more.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
I had a question of my own that I wanted to ask. So my question is, you had mentioned existing with like fragments of yourself. And I think that's such a refreshing perspective, considering that we live in a world that's consistently trying to box and label everything and everybody. And I wanted to know, how do you remain so solid in that perspective in, like, living in the environment that we live in now?
Thank you so much, Ravine, for that question. And I think solid comes from total flexibility. It's like this saying, no? The saying that is only the subtle, remains, and the solid will break. I'm so totally super paraphrasing, but I think it's about that. It's that these very like hard positions. One has to be wary, because then the extremes touch. So if you have to really defend something so profoundly, oopsie, maybe there's something to look into. So I think again, adjectives that are normally used for to the feminine in a pejorative way, like feeble, undecisive, vulnerable, bring it on, and bring it on, and let me question my own self. Primordial is your own self. How do you see, how can you select, oh, this is Raven's voice that is telling me this is Raven's identity that is telling me this. And I think like having a conversation with all your inner Ravens, identify them, and understanding that it's almost like to act like a nice host, and to see, okay, I am in the world as a complex human being, and that has to really be attuned to all those differences, because it's so easy. And I agree with you, that's what people normally want. They want to put you in a box, even though we talk about diversity, and even in art, multidisciplinary, but then it's like, but what should you really do? Or like even like sexual orientations, but really, or religion, anything, is so I feel it is important it's like a dance to really acknowledge us, or the difference. And yes, sometimes in a political level, sometimes you do have to say, okay, today, this identity is forcing me to go in the street and to march and to chant, because my body is needed here. And that's totally, it's super important. I'm not saying like, oh, we live here and we're not committed. No, definitely, there's a political responsibility, and I am for that, when our body is summoned. But yeah, I don't know.
Thank you. That was a great answer. Our next question will be from Nick. Nick is going to ask a question on behalf of Fong.
Sure. Thank you so much for this conversation. And Fong is in a meeting, and he wanted us to ask a question on his behalf. And his question is, you mentioned alchemy in your work a few times, and the word alchemy itself is material transformation that is materialized by each individual differently. In your own sense of alchemy, does it at all relate to the tradition of magic realism? But I'm so sorry, Jessica, I think you have to turn your mic on.
I think for me, actually it's two different. I think for me, it's two different questions. Like for me, I love alchemy, thinking about how Carl Jung likes the psychology of alchemy, meaning like he was interested in alchemy because it preceded chemistry and it preceded psychology. And for him, the projections that these alchemists were doing, it was that incredible insight into our psyche, and the literal conversion of like lead to gold was the interest, let's put it that way, of the psyche to illuminate aspects that are unknown, and to do shadow work, and to work with again darkness, to take out something that is valuable psychologically. So it's not, so I mean, I'm also interested in that. I'm really interested in the psychologically appeal of alchemy in our transformation and our constant change. So the alchemist, you know, and Carl Jung and our psyche is in constant movement. There's no stop. And about magical realism, it's interesting because that for me, it's almost like an aesthetic. And it is an aesthetic. You know, it is also, you know, immediately I talk to, I think about Gabriel Garcia Marquez and the literature movements of South America, Latin America, and it is a way of being of seeing the world. But funny enough, I think it's also a way of experiencing the world that it's not that magical and it's not that surrealist. It's almost like that's a way of looking at the world. You know, is that label happens. But I think it's, I mean, being from Colombia, living in the coast for many years, you experience things, and even when Gabriel Garcia Marquez, you know, would say like these things are. Some of them are really like literal in a weird way of being in the world. So for me, they're parallel. They're not, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that answer.
Our next question is from Monica Bravo, and you should be able to unmute now.
Hi, hola Jessica. So nice to be here. I have a question. It's great you're talking about shadow work and about polarities, and we come from a very polarized environment, Colombia. So I wanted to know a little bit, how do you feel that your perception towards certain things changed while you were in Colombia, spending so much time with your family? And when you produce this work, you know, in terms of like, how has it shifted your relationship to home, motherland, mother, you being a mother away from your children, you were there, you being together with your mom and your dad and your siblings, and developing this work that it was like rooting you in a different way. You were uprooted from New York for a while, and then you came back. And I know that all this, because, you know, we're friends, so I know a little bit about it. So I wanted to ask you, so you can share a little bit of that in the context of this work. Thank you.
Monica, and I'm exhibiting at La Mama Galleria. One more literal for me than that, you know. That's a great gift. So there are mamas everywhere. I think a few things. It was very interesting to be as an adult at the parents' house, and then to be in Colombia during that time. I think what I'm surprised about is how adaptable I was, you know, how like I felt at home being at home. And then when I came back to New York, it took me a little bit, but then I feel at home here. And I think what I've learned through all this process is that one thing that I want to promote is being at home in you, you know, being at home in you. I do this movement called Gyrokinesis, and that's one of the sayings of Julius, who was the founder, is like to be at home in your body. And I would say to be at home in your body, to be at home in the planet. So I think at this age, I became very adaptable, surprisingly so. And also having access to my real parents is very valuable, but also understanding that, you know, and being present for my sons also, and for my brothers, and but that we can all activate these archetypes all the time, that it's not about having, you know, children or not, or it's about affections, and we can all be moms and daughters and fathers, and all those archetypes will help us navigate the world in a more fluid way, and in a way that we sometimes, when we talk, you know, we can be moms to each other, and that I think it's very nice, you know, the malleability of roles and of energies that are available to us. You know, is that so fun? You know, because you sometimes don't understand that these energies are available to all of us, and it sounds like woo, woo. No, it's not about that. You know, it really is about cultivation. It doesn't come like, you know, in a genie. It's about really mindfulness, cultivation, conversation, friendship. You know, yeah.
Thank you so much for your question. And thank you so much, Jessica and Suzanne, for this wonderful conversation and to see your beautiful work. We have a tradition at the Rail to end our program with a poetry reading. And so I'd like to welcome Anthony to the stage, but let me read his bio, I'm sorry. Anthony Madrid's poems have appeared in Best American Poetry, Boston Review Conjunctions, Fence, Georgia Review, and Harvard Review. He is the author of I Am Your Slave Now, Do What I Say, and Try Never, both from Canarium Press. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna read 3 poems. These are from this is from a book that's coming out supposedly in the next few months, which is called Whatever's Forbidden the Wise. And I am reading 3 pieces that I'm kind of fond of. Probably shouldn't say that, but I do like these 3, so that's what I picked. This one, the first one is called Like a Cloud Above a Ravine. And it does touch on Taoist themes that were mentioned in one of the answers by Jessica, so maybe it's a little appropriate. Like a cloud above a ravine is the hell you already know. That sublime work of the imagination by Dante Alighieri. But the rain that falls from that cloud is not made up of human souls. It rains, and the rain funnels down into the something other than human sewer. Look how a Chinese writing brush ends in a cone of rigid horsehair. Loaded with ink, the cone will flex, will leave a wet trench in the rice paper. It will leave an attractive trench, and the daylight sucked into the ink will give it a reflective shine dot, like looking into an animal's eye. Which of you has looked into the looking up eyes of a hair trigger fox, a backyard fox, or a campsite coyote, Taoist, unintelligible, brave? Which of you knows how not to part the pebble on the beach from its colors, the songbird from its social network, the fruit from its multifaceted peel? Oh, that sugary piece of phosphorus in its form-fitted velvet casing, that ancient Egyptian sarcophagus meant to be opened from the inside. And each seed-bearing fruit has an atmosphere. Each has its several moons, has tides subject to gravity, changing weather, lunar eclipses. But should an arrow suddenly snatch the waiting pomegranate out of your hand, if it snatches the cap off your head, recall its circuit has only begun. For the arrow of the luckless archer returns to the middle of his or her back. There, between athletic shoulder blades, is a diploma tube full of arrows. And so it is time for graduation. The genie's gone back to his bottle, the devils to their fallow hells, and the Chinese writing brush and the cloud above the ravine wherein the charged particles have sorted themselves along their up and down axis, and the looking up eyes of the fox and the sarcophagus and the campsite are irreducible to a system, are each of them floating over a void. Truly, all hells and hierarchies are works of the imagination, and equally, it is not the part of the Taoist sage to conjure meaningless hells. The other 2 poems are my Buddhist poems. They rhyme, and they came out of a vast ocean of reading of the Buddhist sutras, which I did all at once, but that's a story for another time, some snowy night by the fire. 2 poems. The first one is called Baby Snake Signs with a Flourish. Baby snake signs with a flourish. Her checkbook is any flat stone. How many will benefit from the teaching cannot be known. A male bison is a torn up carpet. A male bison is Wallace Stevens saying my guru is exempt, releases demons. The pelican in flight is a trash bag. The fish in a flash is his diet. The learned will never learn and cannot be quiet. The pecan tree is out of work now. Her tears hit the roof of the bus. If mind and Buddha are intrinsically one, why the fuss? Stately is the yellow-headed blackbird. He can stand on a blade of grass. Your lecture may not be enlightenment, but it'll pass. Deneb is the swan's ass flap, yes, and and Rigel is Orion's foot. You should have nothing to do with ideas, is nicely put. The owl is an orchestral kettle drum, is a French horn with a button-down beak. Of patriarchs' samadhi transmission, we ought not speak. Underrated and underserrated, this lizard has a hazardous lip, who grabs the Dharma with hot little hand, lets it slip. Here's a wintergreen field of sagebrush, twisted up at the foot of a fawn. At the moment of perfect enlightenment, Buddha's gone. And I got one more. Brown bear is a confiding schoolgirl. This one, I want you to pay attention at the very end because I have a visual attached to it. So at the very end, there's a visual. Okay. Brown bear is a confiding schoolgirl. Brown bear is a confiding schoolgirl. She plays patty cake with a trout. Beginners are always misled into battling doubt. The snows of Kilimanjaro, the forest floors under the covers, the fact we're already enlightened, we learn from others. This tree has a jigsaw bark pattern, has fruit and flower and fur. The perfected being has no idea which to prefer. Owl is a sullen contemplative. Her composure is evilly wrecked, but is sattva by definition does not reflect. 3 kittens live under that crepe myrtle. Their way is to loll and retire. You may wonder and ponder forever, you may not inquire. Rabbit will get his 9 innings. These 9 will be like the last 9. Venerating stupas, the master said, is a pastime. The stag is a dashing hood ornament, is commonly thought an alarmist. Tathagata doesn't know squat aside from the dharmas. Kangaroo is an insulting marsupial. She leaves her coat in the hallway. Is enlightenment ever gradual? Is it always? Skunk family will amble in a herd. They go slow without any arguments, just like the scholar Fu Sheng transmitting the book of documents. And now, using the latest technology and advanced techniques, I have here an image of the scholar Fu Sheng transmitting the book of documents. Right there, that's him. That's an authentic photograph taken 2,500 years ago. Anyway, that's it. Thanks everybody for listening. That's all I got.
Thank you so much, Anthony. That was amazing. So thank you, Anthony and Jessica and Suzanne. And we'd also like to thank everyone at the MAMA for helping make today's event possible. Over the past 22 years, the Brooklyn Rail has brought together art, music, dance, film, theater, literature, and thoughtful social and political mediations on our monthly publication and our public events, like here in our daily NSE. Please check the chat for a link to donate to support our writers, editors, and operations here at the Rail. Join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for our 90th Radical Poetry reading with Downs Leslie Bumstead
Heather Fuller, Kay Lorraine Graham, and Rod Smith. You can now turn on your microphone and say goodbye as you leave.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you so much,
you.
Jessica and Suzanne. Have a lovely
Thank
day.
you.
Wonderful.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Raven. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Suzanne.
Everyone.
Thank you, Anthony.
Hey, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Yay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.